Welcome, welcome. It's Monday. Time for Asana alignments class or basics class, whatever we want to call it. Let's see. All right. So getting going. Hi, Victoria. Getting going, and like I said, tonight we're going to be going over downward dog. So my idea tonight is just to talk about common alignments in downward dog and sort of go over how you can make your downward dog feel better, because that's really what alignment is all about. It's making us feel good in our bodies. And sometimes we struggle in poses, and when we can actually align ourselves, those struggles tend to go away. Let me make sure that Facebook can see properly. All right. So, happy Monday. I hope everybody's doing well. Yeah, let's get into downward dog and see what we think about this sort of very pivotal yoga pose. You'd be really hard pressed to go to a yoga class that isn't a restorative class or like a yin class, even in a yin class sometimes, and not do a downward dog. So the more we can get aligned in our downward dog, I think, the better. So if you're not on your mat already, or you're not in a space where you can do a downward dog, who else is there? Hi, Anna. Yay. So going over downward dog tonight, you can join me on your mat. And let's be a little unconventional tonight, and let's start in child's pose. So I like to take the knees wide, sit back over the heels, just let the head drop down. Forehead can be on the floor. I'm not going to drop mine down so I can still talk to you all, but your forehead can be on the floor. And really sink the hips over the heels, and just be here and find your breath. Sometimes it's nice to come into a child's pose, Balasana, and kind of turn the rest of the world off. And when we connect with our breath in this pose, we can feel that this is always the case, but sometimes we forget. Our breath is three-dimensional. It doesn't just go into the front of our body. It goes into the back of our body and the sides of our body as well. And so being here in child's pose for a moment, we can feel that the breath can go into the back of our body. And sometimes we hear yogis say that our back body represents our connection to source or the universe or God, however we want to think of it. And so when we can take the time to feel into the back of our body, it can really help to ground us, to connect us. Oddly, that seems counterintuitive, right? We usually think about connecting as going forward, but really when we set deep into ourselves and connect with that back body space, we can better connect with the world around us often. So take a few more breaths, and as you do, just set an intention, whatever you'd like to focus on for these next 15 or 20 minutes. We're not going to be here super long. As I said, we're going over downward dog alignments tonight. So maybe your intention is to learn a little bit more about alignment in downward dog. Maybe your intention is just to get inverted for a moment, because that's what downward dog is. It's a little inversion. Maybe your intention is just to be here and be present. Maybe your intention is to feel the connection of all of us here doing yoga together online. Whatever your intention is, it's just for you. You don't have to share it. But hold in the space of your heart and take a few more nice long breaths. Just really letting your hips sink over your heels and feeling the breath going into the back of your body. And then go ahead and look forward. Let's come up to all fours to start. Before we get into downward dog, let's come to all fours. And spread your fingers nice and wide, hands under the shoulders, knees under the hips. Let's warm up our spine a little bit. Just take a big inhale, arch, look up towards the sky. Press through your hands and your shins and round your back up to the ceiling with your exhale. So back and forth like that, inhaling and exhaling. This is one of my favorite warm-ups. It just feels so good to get the spine moving. And it feels so good to match the movement up with the breath. Just back and forth a few more times. And then we'll come to neutral. So I want to go ahead and say that if you don't practice yoga much, if you've just started, if maybe downward dog feels like a lot for you, I want to offer up tonight, if you want to practice what I call downward puppy, which is not puppy pose. Puppy pose is a different pose. But what I call downward puppy, you can do that. So we can all try downward puppy before we get to downward dog. So downward puppy, you're going to keep your knees on the ground and walk your hands forward. And we're not trying to get our heart to the floor. That's puppy pose. But downward puppy, we're just trying to get a straight line from our hands to our hips. And then you'll be able to play along with some of the alignments that we're going to do in downward dog. Some of them might not work quite the same with our lower body, but the ones in our upper body you'll be able to do. So if holding downward dog is a lot for you, you can be here. You could also be on all fours and listen, and some of the alignments will apply there too, but not quite as many. So let's go ahead right into a downward dog. So from all fours on your hands and your knees, one of the first things we're going to talk about is the length of our downward dog. And I see this a lot. A lot of times people's downward dogs are too short. So with our hands under our shoulders and our knees on the floor, if we lift up into downward dog from here, our downward dog is definitely going to be too short. So let's take the hands forward about 6 inches or so and spread the fingers really wide, like as wide as they'll go, with the index fingers facing forward or maybe even slightly out. If you have wide shoulders, you can take the hands really wide on the mat, but we want to make sure the hands are at least shoulder width apart. And then we'll tuck the toes, lift the hips up and back, and try downward dog. Before we get into all the alignments, let's just pedal out the legs, bend one knee, bend the other knee, just wiggle a little bit. If you've never done downward dog, we want to start getting comfortable here with our hands on the ground, with our head below our hips, this little inversion. And then once you've pedaled your legs a little bit, we'll just reach the hips back, take a big breath. And from here, let's come forward into plank pose, which is the top of a push-up. So from downward dog to plank pose, top of a push-up, or vice versa, from plank pose, let's go back to downward dog. Ideally, for a good distance in your downward dog, your hands and your feet should not move. So let's try that again. Inhale, come forward to plank pose. So you should have a nice straight line from your shoulders to your hips. Your hands and your feet should move. The balls of your feet should be right under your heels. And then back to downward dog. Try that one more time. Inhale forward to plank pose. And exhale back to downward dog. So your choice, you can take 3 breaths right here in downward dog. Or you can come on down to child's pose and relax for a moment. All right, so feel free to come down and take a look if you want. If your downward dog is too short, so we just said plank pose to downward dog, that's usually a good place, hands and feet don't move. But if your downward dog is too short, and you're really focused with getting the heels on the ground, what happens is that our lower back starts to round. And we want to make sure that our back can get really long. So with the feet out longer, we don't need to worry about the heels touching the floor. That doesn't need to be the goal in downward dog. We just want to get the spine long. And so having the downward dog a little longer helps us to do that. We're going to go over another thing that helps us to do that. But before we do that, let's come forward to plank pose one more time. And then exhale, lower down to the ground. Let's have a little baby cobra, just for fun. Shoulders away from the ears. And then tuck the toes, lift on up to all fours. And then take the knees wide, sit back over your heels. Let's all have a child's pose, take a few breaths. So at any point in this little flow, so we're spending a lot of time on our hands, and that's more work than it seems like it ought to be usually. So if any point in this little flow you need a break, come to child's pose. If you want to just sit up and watch, so you're learning the alignments, even if you're not holding all the poses, that's totally okay too. Take a couple more breaths. And then go ahead, come all the way back up. So again, making sure from all fours, hands out about 6 inches or so, tuck the toes. Downward facing dog. If you want to do a check, come forward into plank pose and back, you can, just to make sure you're where you are. So we're talking about keeping the spine long, and having a long downward dog is going to help us do that. Remember we said if we walk the feet in, the back tends to round. I hope you can see that on me. But with the feet out, even then, if we've got tight hamstrings, oftentimes the back is rounded too. And we want to start working on getting the back as long as possible. So one of my number one pieces for advice when you start doing downward dog is to bend your knees and then reach your butt back as far as you can. Almost like you're trying to put your ribs on your thighs, although we don't want to do that because we don't want to flail out that way. But we're just thinking about reaching the sit bones back, making the spine as long as possible. And you might start to straighten your legs. And if you start to straighten your legs and your back rounds, then re-bend your knees and keep that long spine. And you can do your downward dog with bent knees for years if it serves you. Right? Long spine is more important than straight legs and more important than heels on the ground. All right, let's come forward to plank pose again. Lower all the way down to the ground. Toes reach back behind you. Inhale, another little cobra. Exhale, lower, tuck the toes. Your choice, downward dog or child's pose for 3 breaths. And see if you can feel it in yourself. That nice long spine, the knees bend. If you're in child's pose, just take a break, be there. But if you're in downward dog, feel the long spine, feel the knees bend if you need to, and take a few breaths. All right, so if you're in your child's pose, come on down, come on up to your knees. If you're on your downward dog, we're gonna come down to our knees and sit back over our heels for a moment if that feels okay for you. So we've talked about long spine in our downward dog. We've talked about potentially bending the legs. We've talked about the heels don't have to touch the floor. Now we're going to think about our upper body in our downward dog. So if you haven't done much downward dog, and we were just in this downward dog, and you're already thinking, my wrists are tired, my wrists hurt, feels like a lot of work in my arms, all these things, our alignments are going to help with that. So one of the most important things to do is when your hands are on the ground, spread your fingers really wide. Hand alignment is super important, especially when we're on the ground. So fingers are spread really wide, and you're going to press through the pads of your hand and the pads of your fingers. So your hands aren't just hanging out on the floor, they're pressing into the mat like really hard. You're pushing down. If you want to take it a step further, you can liven up your hands even more. And I'll show you how to do that in a second. But the more you liven up your hands, the more it's going to take the weight out of your wrists and help that weight come up into your shoulders, which we're going to talk about more too. But with your fingers spread wide on the ground, pressing to the pads of your fingers, if you're pushing into the ground, your hands aren't going to move because your mat is hopefully sticky. But you want to isometrically draw your thumb and your forefinger together. I'm doing it in the air, so if you can see me, you get this action going on. But when you're on your mat, that's not going to happen. But what's going to happen is you're going to get a sucking up in the center of your hand. And it's just like the arch of your foot. It's going to help absorb the weight and the shock there on the ground and really start to take the weight out of your wrists. So without coming into downward dog, just here on your knees, take your hands on the ground, spread your fingers wide, press into your finger pads, try to draw the thumb and the forefinger together, keeping the finger pads pressed into the ground, and feel how much that livens up your hands. Those are the hands that you want when you come up into downward dog. Now we're here and we can play a little more with our alignment before we get all the way up into downward dog again. So the other things that we want to do when we come into downward dog are we want to try to have an outer spiral of our upper arm. That means our bicep rolls out, our tricep rolls in. If that all sounds like gibberish, one of the ways that we can do that is to soften the elbows a little bit and to think about turning the insides of the elbows up towards the sky. So maybe you can see me do that. Take the elbows out a little bit, turn the points of the elbows down, the insides of the elbows up, and we get that outer spiral in our upper arm. All right, so let's try our downward dog with all of that. So On your all fours, hands forward a little, where you think they needed to be for the plank pose. Fingers spread wide, press through your finger pads, claw the earth, feel that suction cup hand, and then lift the hips up and back. Downward facing dog. Take a couple breaths if you need bent knees, long spine, and let's try the elbow thing. So the elbows can bend a little bit, points down to the ground, insides up, and then as you get that rotation, then re-straighten the arms a bit, and take a couple breaths. And then from there, come forward plank pose. We can lower down for a cobra like we did before. If you want to, you can lower down, flip to the tops of the feet, have an upward facing dog. And then back to downward facing dog. Take a couple breaths. Think about your alignment, still fingers spread wide. That is universal whenever your hands are on the ground. Nothing changes. You're still pressing through the finger pads. Think about outer spiraling the upper arm. Take a couple breaths. If you need to be down in child's pose, be down in child's pose. And then let's all come down or up to all fours one more time. So one of the last things I want to go over for our downward dog, so we've got our long spine, we've got the maybe bent knees to help with the long spine. We're not worrying about the heels on the ground. We've got our fingers spread wide, pressing through our finger pads. We've got outer spiral of our upper arm. One of the things that we can take that extra oomph for the outer spiral of our upper arm is to help us widen through the tops of our shoulders and let the shoulder blades slide on our back. And we can work on that here on all fours before we lift up into our downward dog. So on your all fours, fingers spread wide because the hands are on the ground. You should do that with our hands in the air too, but we don't need to get into that. Let's try that outer spiral of our upper arm. So from here, the insides of the elbows are going to turn forward. The points of the elbows are going to turn back to your knees. And when you do that, I hope you can feel it naturally starts to broaden across your collarbone and broaden across your shoulder. So that's an action that we want to feel in our downward dog. The other thing we want to feel is the shoulder blades sliding down and together on our back. And we can play with that kind of like we did when we did our warm-up, when we arched and rounded our back. So let's try it. When we press out through our back and round our back up, the shoulder blades come off our back. Sometimes we want to do that for some things, not very often. But then when we go to do the arch again, the shoulder blades slide together on our back. We don't want to have the sag in the downward dog, but we want that feeling in our upper body of the shoulder blades sliding together. So just try that a couple times. You don't have to do the full arch and round, but just try pressing the shoulder blades off the back, sliding the shoulder blades on the back, and at the same time, outer spiraling the upper arm, and see how that feels. What should happen, you can sit back for a second, when we do all this, it really integrates our shoulders into our sockets, makes a much more nice and solid base for our downward dog. And it might feel like some more work in your hands, might feel like more work in your shoulders at first, but you're gonna be able to hold your downward dog a whole lot longer with all this integration in the shoulders, rather than just not doing that alignment and letting the weight dump into your wrists. So let's try our downward dog one more time with all these alignments. So come on up to all fours, take the hands forward, tuck the toes, downward facing dog. Let's make sure we remember everything. So nice long spine, making sure we've got a good distance between the hands and the feet. Heels are probably lifted off the mat. Maybe we bend the knees, reach the sit bones back even more. Fingers are spread, pressing through the finger pads. Maybe bend the elbows, get that outer rotation of the upper arm, and then see about the shoulder blades on the back. See what that feels like here. The tendency is we almost want to push out the other way, which ends up being a lot of work, and it puts the shoulders up by the ears and is really hard to hold. Even me, I don't like being like this. It's a lot of work. So to take the shoulder blades on the back and widen across the collarbones, if you want to watch me, it actually can be quite dramatic. right? It really you almost sink down, and then you can be here for a while. It doesn't feel like as much effort. This is muscular action to hold yourself where you're pushing. This is shoulder integration. The joint is nice and congruent, and you can be here for a while. Let's come forward to plank pose. I know it's a lot of talking. Lower down, cobra or up dog, you can decide. And then back to downward dog. One more time. Be in your downward dog for yourself for 3 breaths. Think about the alignments. Think about what you feel in your body, what makes sense. And then when you're ready, come on down. Balasana, child's pose. We're going to end like we started. We're going to end in Balasana tonight instead of Shavasana. If you want to take a Shavasana when we're done, of course, by all means, take a Shavasana. I will not deny you a Shavasana, but I wanted to end in child's pose tonight just for this short sequence. Let your head rest on the ground. If it feels good having your arms reaching out, that's great. If you'd rather bring the arms back and relax even more, you can do that. Just take a few breaths. Take your mind back to whatever intention that you set. No judgment, of course. Just check in with yourself. See how it went. It is my wish for you that these downward dog alignments will sink in. I hope you can use them in your practice. I hope you can bookmark this video and refer back to it. If you need it and you can't find it, let me know. I'll make sure you get a link for it. And if you have any questions for me, please let me know. Go ahead, you can rise all the way up. If it feels okay to sit on your knees, you can sit on your knees. If you'd rather sit cross-legged, you can sit cross-legged. Now let's bring our hands to touch at our heart. Most importantly of all, tonight, today, this morning, wherever you are, take a moment and honor the light that exists within you and thank yourself for coming to this practice, for being open to learning about alignments, being open to learning about downward dog. I thank you all for being here with me and joining me for this as well. And I honor the light within you and within all beings. Namaste. All right. Yes, I will send you the live video once I post it. Yay for everybody who was here. Hi, Lisa. Yay. All right. So I hope everybody has a really good night, and I will see you guys again soon. We've got this class every Monday at 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time. We also have a Niyamas class going on Thursdays at 7:30, Mythology and Meditation on Sundays at 12:30, Chair Yoga Wednesdays at 9:30, all times Eastern Time, and all sorts of other stuff. So stay tuned. All the videos are posted on YouTube later, so you can check them out there, and they're live for a while on Instagram and Facebook too, or not live, but saved on Instagram and Facebook too. And of course, you can find all the classes, jincarter.com/online, and if you are inclined to donate, that would be awesome, jincarter.com/donate, but totally not required. So I hope everybody's doing well, and I will see you guys again soon. All right, aloha, namaste.